Okay. We're on 84b. So Tsar Kavoy Bishpud B'Masmer Chulu. We're on Peidal at Amud Beis. It's the last section, but it's I don't know what that is. Maybe like 15 lines up, 12 lines up. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, Shalom's here too.
Oh, I was going to tell you, Shalom's not here.
Yeah, no, there he is.
Okay. So we're starting Tsar Kavoy Bishpud. Let me see exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's 11 lines up. Sorry. We thank Hashem that they're able to learn Torah every day. In the schus of our learning, we should have Beis Mikdash immediately. And also we're learning in memory of Zahava Golda. So we start like this. We're talking about Tsar. We're talking about the 5 types of damages that a person needs to pay if he damages someone else. So one of them is the pain. So an example of pain is if he burns him with a spit or with a nail. He hits him with a nail. So it pokes him with the nail. So there's pain, but it's not damages. So now the Gemara says, Tsar Shlei b'makom nezek mishtale mantana. Who holds that you have to pay for pain even though there was no damage there? The guy's going to say, look, I didn't do anything. He said, yeah, but you hurt me. I said, well, so what? It's no problem. It'll go away. So why should I have to pay for that? So in the Mishnah, it appears that you do have to pay for that. So which opinion is this? So Amar Rava says Ben Azai here. It's the opinion of Ben Azai. The Tanya, because we have a brisa. Now what happened was, in the Psukim it says, Kriya tachas kriya, Petza tachas patza, and Chabura tachas chabura. I think that's as much as the Psukim that I'm going to need. So it says a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, and a bruise for a bruise. Okay. So when it says kavia, what does it mean, a burn? Does it mean a burn that has a damage along with it, or is it a burn without a damage along with it? So Rebbe says kavia nemra tchila, that when it says a burn, it just means a burn, just a plain burn.
When you say damage, you mean permanent.
Yeah.
So a first degree burn. Like
yeah. Yeah. That
dermatologist. That's all.
Right.
You should see what I did to the dermatologist.
You should still have 5 types of damage.
Ben Azai says that even though it says burn, but that burn is referring to a bruise as well. It's a type of burn that has a bruise together with it, a wound with it. The Maikamiflagi. What's the machlekes? Rebbe holds kviyad les bechabur mashma when it says in the pasuk that a burn for a burn, that burn is talking about, or I rather say, I could have thought it was talking about just the burn. Kasvrachman chabura. So it comes along the pasuk later and says chabura. It says chabura tachas chabura. Legluya the kviyad es bechabura in ilai. It's coming to explain what type of burn it was that we were talking about when we said burn. Talking about a burn that has a bruise or a wound along with it. And so therefore, when are you going to be chayav for a burn? To pay for the burn is only if there's actually a wound along with it. There's no such thing as tsar without nezek. There's no such thing as pain without damage. Because when the pasuk then tells me, it says a burn, which that sounds like it's just pain. Then afterwards it says a wound. I don't know which one is wound, which one is bruise. Petza and Chabura. Whatever the case is, those are talking about that there is a damage, so that's coming to explain what type of burn it was. It was a burn with the damage. Ben Azai says no. Really, a burn, money. A burn means a burn without any wound. I'm sorry, a burn means a burn with a wound. Then afterwards, when it says a wound, so 1 second, I thought you said a wound already. oh, it's going back to tell me that when you said a burn, it meant to burn without a wound. But if it didn't say wound, then I would have thought that burn meant to burn with a wound. If it says wound, it tells me that a burn is just a plain burn. Comes out is that the author of our Mishnah that says that a person that has to pay for pain without any wound would be the opinion of Ben Azai. He's the one that says that, what does he call this? He calls this Chabura Nemra Tchila. It says a wound first. Now, when it's the way we're explaining it is when it says a wound first, that means that when it said a burn, it's including in the burn that it was a type of wound. And then when the pasuk tells me wound, then it takes the wound out of the burn and puts it in the wound on its own, and the burn is left with just as a burn. Yeah, the language over here is a little complicated, but that's the idea. Now, the question is, what does burn mean? Okay, so the language of Benazai was that it says wound was said first. Wound was said first, which means that burn meant wound until it later said wound, and then burn just means burn without a wound. No, we're not getting into the generalization. The Gemara is going to do that later. Over here, we're not doing that. Over here, we're just saying that that how to translate it, just how to translate it. Yeah, just regular translation. Well, Maskefla Rav Papa has a question on this. It says, Adarabba, Ibcha Mistabri, you could say exactly the opposite. You see, we're dealing here with language, and the language is very vague. Because all we have from Rebbe is Kaviya Nemer Tchila, a burn was said first. And what we have from Ben Azai is Chabur Nemer Tchila, a wound was said first. Now, we don't know what that means, and we just made up what it means. That, oh, when Rebbe says Kaviya Nemer Tchila, that means that really I would have thought the burn is a burn on its own. Comes along Chabura to translate that Kaviya doesn't mean a burn on its own, it means a burn with a wound.
But Kvi is the first one in the puzzle.
Is the first one in the puzzle. So the later one tells me is explaining what type. It's like as if it's commentary on the kviya. What type of kviya is it? Rav Papa is going to say it's exactly the opposite. It goes like this. Really, the Mishnah's Rebbe, not Benazai. Rebbe Aimer kviya nemer tchila. Rebbe said a burn goes first. He's savar. He holds kviya dispei chabura mashma. A burn means a burn together with the wound. That's what a burn is. A burn has a wound together with it. And afterwards it says Chabura, it's coming to teach me that the burn actually meant without a wound. Because it said wound later. So obviously the first one must be not. So now the way we're translating is Kviya Nemra Tchila. It said burn first without the wound. That's the way we get it at the end of the whole story. First it says a burn, but I think that the burn is together with the wound. Comes along the pasuk and says a wound, that goes back and tells me kviya. In other words, this language of Rebbe kviya nemer tchila, is that talking about what I would have thought, or is that talking about what I do think after it says chabura? The first way of learning this was that's what I would have thought. Kviya nemer tchila. I would have thought that it's only a burn. Comes along chabura and tells me no, it actually means with a wound, and there's no such thing as pain without a wound. That's the first way of learning it. Comes along Rav Papa and says, no, we're going to learn it the opposite. Kviya Nemer Tchila means that I would have thought that it was a burn with a wound. Comes along Chabura to tell me that it's only a burn alone, and it said burn first. So that now it's like the maskana. The conclusion, Rebbe's words is the way the Gemara concludes, not the way the Gemara would have thought.
It's funny that the word Chabura, we have the same word to mean the opposites. Chabura here is a group, but Chabura is
A group?
Chabura,
Yeah. Yeah. In that song, that guy, there was this guy, this like from kid was singing like on, it was like YouTube or something, and he was saying, I drink paraduma. I forget like his thing. They meant Red Bull. And one of his things over there was that if you don't come to my chabura, I'll give you a chabura. One of his, I forgot exactly. I had some cute stuff. So, okay, I'm sorry.
I was just thinking that it was similar, like, That's what it says, eye for eye. It said this.
An eye for an eye, if it meant money or if it meant
Yeah,
actually.
like they use. I don't know. It reminded me of.
Yeah, so we are using that same style pasuk. I don't know if it's exactly in that pasuk. Maybe it's the pasuk before. But we're using that, and now we're just trying to translate what does the burn mean? Does it mean without damage, or does it mean pain without damage or pain with damage? Okay, so the pasuk says chabura to teach me that a burn means without the damage. Ben Azai said the opposite. That when it says the bruise first, he holds that really a burn means without a bruise, without any damage. Because the pasuk then adds in that there's damage. To tell me that a burn is only if there is damage. And if there's no damage there, then there's no payment for that. And those words of Nemar Tchila, Kviya Nemar Tchila, Chaburat Nemar Tchila, is said on the conclusion, not said on the Hava Amina, not what I would have thought originally. Yeah, this is a very confusing little piece. But Inami, or else we can learn it like this. Kuli Alma, Kviya Ben Despechabur, Ben Lespechabur Mashma. Kviya could mean anything. Could mean a burn, could mean that there is damage, it could mean that there's without damage. However, Vahacha, the discussion here between Rebbe and Ben Azai goes like this. There's a discussion if you can use a generalization and a specific when they're not directly next to each other. Because over here it said, Kviya tachas kviya, petza tachas patza, and chabura tachas chabura. So in between kviya, the burn, and the wound is the bruise, is the petza tachas patza. So if I'm going to look at this as a generalization and a specific, then I would do kviya is the generalization, and then the chabura is what type of kviya is it? It's a type of kviya that's a chabura. That's the specific. If I say that, then I've just limited the type of burn, that it's only a type of burn that has a damage as well. Rebbe holds Rebbe says you can't learn it as klalaprat because it's too far away. There's petza tachas patza in between. There's the bruise for a bruise is in between, the wound for a wound, and the burn for a burn, right? So I'm not able to get what type of burn it is because the bruise for the wound for a wound is too far away, right? I hope that's the way it's being translated there. Wound for a wound. Yeah. Okay. Ben Azai holds. Ben Azai says that no, it could be learned as a generalization and a specific. Okay, so 1 second. So what does that mean? So according to Ben Azai, the only type of burn that a person has to pay for is a burn that also has a damage together with it. Now, according to this, so according to Rebbe, when we said already kviya, that means a burn, and it's not defining what type of burn it is. It could be a burn even without any damage. So then why does he have to say later damage? If you have to pay for pain, of course you have to pay for damage. The question is if you have to pay for pain without damage. But if you have to pay for pain without damage, then for sure you have to pay for pain with damage. Or you have to pay for damage, at least. So why do I need to say the wound if we already know they have to pay for pain? So the Gemara answers, the Gemara says, why does it have to say a wound? According to Rebbe, it's coming to tell me they have to pay for both even when they're together. I know you have to pay for a wound. That's a damage. I know you have to pay for pain. But if you already paid for pain, or if you already paid for the wound, do you have to pay for the wound or for the pain together? Pay for both. So Kamash Malan, that yes, you do. That's what, according to Rebbe, that's what it's teaching. Okay. Gemara now is discussing what the Mishnah said. How do you determine how much is the value of the pain? The Gemara says that you would see how much a person would be willing to take for this to happen.
Sometimes people have like, these injuries, and like only that person knows like how much it hurts. Like you could try to explain, but like unless you're going through it, like
Right. Right.
so how would the other person say, "Oh"?
Well, what the Gemara thinks right now is that you would ask the guy, tell him that, or ask other people or something, and we would say, well, how much would you be willing to take to have this happen to you? How much? What's its value? Gemara's going to discuss.
Just don't ask Morgan and Morgan because they'll get $5 million for the injury.
You prick your finger. That's it.
The Gemara asks, how do you evaluate when there's damage? How do you evaluate also the pain? The Gemara is asking is that you already took the money for the damage. Now, how do you get the money of the pain alone? If it was just pain, so then I understand. But he already was paid for the damage. Paid for the damage, that we evaluated by how much less he's worth to an owner to be sold as a slave. So Amar Avua de Shmuel, this is Shmuel's father. He comes up every once in a while. Says, what we do is we evaluate how much a person would want for his hand to be cut off. The Gemara says, for his hand to be, that's the damage that we're talking about. Hand to be cut off. That's not just pain. Over there you have everything. We're looking at how do you evaluate just the pain? How do we get just the pain? Are we dealing with fools? Which I think what the Gemara is asking is that no one would take any amount of money to have his hand cut off. All the money in the world no one would give them. So
The Israeli that pasuk, which I think
oh, Tishkach Emili. But yeah.
So kind of like
Yeah, but not for money. Don't do it for money. I think.
But it shows you the value of Yerushalayim.
People take crazy jobs, like their health risks to the jobs. Those guys that clean the nuclear waste things, they know that it's dangerous to them. I'm sure they have to sign something that they're aware of the dangers. But there's a lot of money and they do it. But that's because they say it's not like an immediate thing. It's I know it's over time. It's not going to be so healthy. How long are we going to live anyway? And whatever whatever cheshbon they have. But it's not an immediate thing for someone to actually say like, yeah, immediately, like this is what for a certain amount of money, this is what they're going to get. It doesn't make sense.
Depends on how poor they are to start. Like a desperate person might say, I got no other choice. So, well, I'll lose my left hand. Okay, but it's $10 million.
Like in China, they sell organs. And then there are those that steal organs, but I mean, they'll sell their organs.
Someone that was very poor originally would do it, or someone that's very poor originally is used to being poor and wouldn't do it.
Would do it.
I think he wouldn't. I think he's used to living on nothing. That's his life.
It's called the marginal utility of income.
What's
How much marginal utility of income depends on how poor you are. Like a poor person, but you're saying, but has he been poor all his life, or is he just?
I think as someone that's always been poor, that's the way they live. They eat like those people in China. They look for bugs and they eat things.
Right. So he might be willing to take a high risk job for little money, but a rich person who became poor, I say, I'm not going to lose my arm for that. No, I don't know.
I think it would be the opposite.
The opposite.
Okay.
We shouldn't know it.
Right.
Yeah.
The job that I thought like that it could be instantly, it's like for example, like on spaceships, like it's very high risk.
Yeah.
A lot of them like sometimes they don't come back. Sometimes they don't.
That's not money. Hill is saying the people that go on the spaceships, it's a very high risk astronauts. It's very high risk, but that's not for money. They have like their concept of science, and it's like an ideal, and it's all this,
So it might be
the
a little bit
future of
crazy.
the world is we're going to end up on a different planet, and we're,
I like when they spin trailers.
Okay, so the Gemara now says, talking about to cut off his cut off hand. Now, what does it mean to cut off his cut off hand? It means that his hand was already severed, but it's still hanging. Not severed. His hand is already not in use, but it's still attached. And now we're gonna to cut that off. The Gemara says, "Yadek tu anami That's embarrassing as well, to have his hand, even though it's not in use, but to have it cut off to be thrown to the dogs is also embarrassing. So it's not just the pain alone. We're looking just for pain.
Who said anything about dogs?
I'm sorry?
Who said anything about dogs? Why you can't just bury the hand?
You could bury it, but I'm not sure if the Gemara means that it's like thrown to the dogs, or the Gemara means that he's now missing. People get fake just for looks. They get prosthetic, whatever, this or that. Put in like a fake eye, a fake this, just for the looks. I think that's part of it.
You mentioned this. There's no obligation to bury the amputated limb because it might cause like tumor, like for a coma.
There's no because it won't cause tumor. It won't, or it will.
It will.
So why shouldn't you bury it?
There's no obligation to bury the amputated limb because it could cause.
No, if it's cut, then you have to bury it.
Number 11. Everything's wrong all the time.
However, care must be taken that and not be left in a place where it could contaminate a Kohen. So the Shvus Yaakov says from this that you don't have to bury an amputated limb.
And before that, this is about a potion. Like they would give a person a potion.
You could debate with that. I think the Gemara maybe you just using an expression here that says that okay, now he's missing his limb. Yeah. Okay. Now the Gemara says, let's say someone was deserving of a punishment by the government. They said, and this punishment was that they had to cut off his hand. And they were going to cut it off with a certain potion, ointment, something that would cause it to come off. There would be less pain. And they say, but we'll give you money if you'll do it with the sword. So how much money would he take to do it in the painful way? Coming off anyway. So we're not discussing here the nezek. We're talking about it's lost anyway. Question is, how much money would he be willing to take to have it done in a painful way? So that would be the price of the pain.
Yeah, that's good.
Gemara now says, though, 1 second. Hi, Amri, no one would take any money to have it done if it's going to be done in a less painful way. It's the opposite. The government is going to cut off his hand with the sword, and he's able, with money, to have them do it in a way that's with anesthesia, that's going to be painless. So how much is he willing to pay for that anesthesia?
We do have anesthesiologists, they're very, very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good, well-paying job.
So that might be determined by monetary where they stand.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This would depend on the person.
I thought something like that's so traumatic, like that you don't even feel the pain sometimes. It's like a wound, a gunshot wound or something like that, where it's like a slice off the hand, like one shot.
I think in the movies they don't feel it or something like that, but I think in real life I think it actually hurts. But someone said that some kids playing with guns or knives or something. His comment was, I didn't think it was going to hurt. I saw in the movies they do this all the time. I didn't think it was going to hurt. Yeah.
Mm.
Like okay. So hi Lito.
I tried that once. You know, in the movies, the guys jump on a train that's always moving. So I was late for a train.
Oh
I
no.
jumped on the train.
Oh no. You
You
get
know what
knocked
happened?
off.
The train's moving, let's say 10 miles an hour, but it's 100 tons. It sent me to the other side of the station flying because I wasn't running at the same speed of it.
Jumped on or jumped off?
Jumped on. I tried to jump on a moving train, like in the movies, right?
Yeah.
It looks like it is
Oh, when
easy.
you just hit the train?
I hit the train and it sent me flying.
You know, for a professor, you ain't so smart.
I was a college fan.
He wasn't
yeah.
studying
I was a freshman.
physics. Wasn't
was
studying physics.
Pre-professor.
Yeah.
I used to ride in between the trains in high school. You know,
Yeah.
So the Gemara now says, "Hi Lito, litain mi ba'ilei." If that's the case, we're talking about how much he's willing to give. It's not. Then it shouldn't have said how much he's willing to take. That's the wrong expression. Amar Huna Breder Rav Yeshua, Lital zemizeh mashinasan zeh. Yeah, it doesn't fit perfectly. But what the Gemara is saying is that what it means is how much this person is going to take, how much the victim is going to take now from the mazik, from the perpetrator, because of what someone will be willing to pay for it. So the word take is not referring to how much the guy is willing to pay. It's referring to how much the victim is now going to get as a payment. Okay. Doesn't fit perfectly in the language, but
Right. Which bus? Which line? Did you
I just did Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua.
That's not what it says here in the English.
Tell me what it
Yeah.
says.
What am I reading? Lito zemi zem mashinaton zeh.
Yeah.
Says Shmuel's father means that this victim is supposed to take from this assailant what this hypothetical person would give to the government representative
Right.
to save himself from
Right.
pain.
Right.
Is that
Yeah. The problem is that it doesn't fit perfectly with Shmuel, with Shmuel's father. Shmuel's father said, how much is a person willing to take for his hand to be cut off? And now we're saying, how much is a worse person willing to pay?
right?
So the Gemara is saying, so why does it say take? It says, no, the take is talking about the guy, the victim that's going to take the money from the perpetrator based on how much someone would be willing to pay for that to happen. So, but when you read it back into Shmuel's father, it doesn't really fit perfectly. But anyway, that's what we're saying. Okay, Ripoy, we're up to medical bills. He has to pay for the medical bills. Taner Rabbanan, taught in the Brisa. What did the Mishnah say? That the Mishnah said that if there's these growths that grow because of the scarring, it has these little growths that grow on it, then he has to pay for that as well. If it heals and then it gets worse and then it heals, he has to pay for all of those each time it gets worse.
Like a keloid, the scar that grows.
What's it called?
Keloid, Keloid. You see it mostly in people of color. Many of them will have scars and they grow. And in Africa, it was actually a sign of beauty. They would mark certain things, and then the scars would be large. White people, most white people don't have keloids.
Keloid. The doctor says.
As
Keloid.
opposed to shrinking scar to growing.
The scar continues to grow. Yeah. Okay. So the Gemara says, let's say it already healed. And then it grows these growths on it. And then the wound gets worse. So Chayv L'Arapais has to heal him again. And he also has to pay for his loss of work because of this.
Was it active?
Maybe.
No.
But if the growths came not because of the wound, they just grew, then you don't have to, he doesn't have to heal it. He doesn't have to pay for the loss of work either. Rabbi Yehuda, that was the Tanna Kamma. Rabbi Yehuda, now take note of Rabbi Yehuda because we're going to have Rabbi Yehuda's son, Rabbi Yehuda, is going to say something later. And the Gemara is going to say that maybe he's following his father's opinion. So Rabbi Yehuda now says, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Af machmas amaka chayv l'rapaisei. Ve'ena chayv litin le'demei shiftei. You only have to pay for the healing, but you don't have to pay for the loss of work when it comes to these growths. There's no loss of work on these growths. Why the healing? Yes, the growth's not. The Gemara is going to explain in a minute. It has to do with the psukim. The Chachamim say this is the most lenient opinion. Shiftai urefuasai, the loss of work and the healing. If you have to pay for the loss of work, then you have to pay for the medical bills. If you don't have to pay for the loss of work, when don't you have to pay for the loss of work? That's when you have these growths. When the person has these growths, he also doesn't have to pay for the medical bills. So basically, the three opinions go like this. Tana Kamma says you have to pay for medical bills and for loss of work. Rabbi Yehuda says only medical bills, not for loss of work. And the Chachamim say you don't have to pay for, because you don't have to pay for the loss of work, you also don't have to pay for the medical bills. So it's a machlekes. But my kamiflagi, what are they arguing about? Amar Rabba says, Ashkachtino l'Rabbanan b'bei Rav. I found the yeshiva students in the house of Rav, the Yasvi, they were sitting with Kamri, and they said, is a person allowed to wrap his wound in a bandage, which is more comfortable for him, but it may not be the best way for it to heal? So what he's doing is he's making himself more comfortable, but may be causing damage to the wound itself. So what happens is like this: Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan hold makanit laget. He's allowed to wrap it up, but the patient needs to be comfortable. Rabbi Yehuda says makaleinit laget, that the patient should not be comfortable. He has to. The main thing is that he has to get healed. Ripa the Tana Bekra Mechayev. However, because the pasuk says v'rapa yerap, it says twice that he has to heal. That teaches me that even though this person was trying to be comfortable, which was not the best thing for his wound, but he still has to pay for the healing. And Sheves, when it comes to the loss of work, Leitana Bekra just says rak shifta yitin. He has to pay, but it doesn't say rak shifta something shifta, right? It doesn't say it twice. So then leimachayev, then he doesn't have to pay it. And I said to them, he dropped the last of the sages, what they're holding. But Rabba says to the students, 1 second, if he doesn't have to, if it wasn't supposed to be wrapped up, and this guy wrapped it up just to make himself comfortable, then that would be considered his own pshia. That would be his own negligence. And why should the perpetrator, the person that hurt the mazik, why should he have to pay for things that he did, which was his own negligence? It must be the wound is supposed to be bandaged, but it's not supposed to be over bandaged, and he over bandaged. So basically what we just did now was we gave him a little bit of leeway that he was supposed to be bandaging it, but he did a little bit too much. So it's not like a total pshi, it's not a total negligence. Rabbi Yehuda savar kiven bleinit lagri say ripa de Tana Bekra mechayev Sheves lei Tana Bekra lemechayev. Rabbi Yehuda holds that since the Torah repeats itself about the doctor's bills, so then he has to pay for that, but he doesn't have to pay for the loss of work. Rabbanan savri kiven Tana Bekra beripa yasheves nami mechayev this kishla ripa. That the Tana Kamma holds that there's a comparison between the healing and the doctor bills and the loss of work. And once he's chayiv to pay for the loss of work, he also chayiv to pay for the once he's chayiv to pay for the doctor bills, he's also chayiv to pay for the loss of work. Rabbi Yehuda sabar sheves le mechayiv. Rabbi Yehuda says that he's not chayiv for the loss of work. Maite rachmana rak, because the pasuk says rak shifta yitin, only the loss of work he has to pay. The word rak means only, or just or only. Rabbanan rak shalei machmas hamakma hudasa. The Rabbanan say that exclusion from the word rak that says only, that's coming to tell me that he doesn't have to pay for loss of work when it comes from things that were not directly caused by the wound. The Rabbanan Basroi, what about the last sages? According to them, why does the pasuk say twice that healing, that you should he has to pay for the healing. Healing, he has to pay. Why does it say that? If we don't really learn anything extra from it, if you don't have to pay for the loss of work, you also don't have to pay for the healing. Why does it say it twice?
Yeah.
So they say, Rabbi Shmuel. This is a very famous Gemara. All the doctors know this by heart. That it's for the Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. That thought the Tanya was taught in the Brisa. Rabbi Shmuel, the house of Rabbi Shmuel said, "V'rapa yirape," that and he should heal him. Mikan from here, shnitten rishus l'reifil l'rapis. Here, there's permission for a doctor to heal, and we don't say that. What are you doing? God made him sick. Now you're coming along and changing that.
Yeah.
We don't say that. We say no. The doctor is allowed to mix in to what God did and to heal.
This is kind of music. Rap music.
Rap music.
Rap. Yeah.
You must
I remember someone asked the Rebbe if everything is in the Torah, so where's their atheism in the Torah? Where do you find in the Torah atheism? The Rebbe said tzedakah, because if you really just believe in Hashem, then you'll say, well, Hashem made him poor. Why should I be mixing in?
Yeah.
But you have to be a little bit of an atheist, and to mix in and that's what I saw this on one of the gem videos. A little surprised to hear that.
I don't understand.
That if you give
The
to
person
Someone
giving
was asking, the
tzedakah,
person giving tzedakah
right?
is has a little bit of lack of faith in Hashem, because he's showing that he could do something even though Hashem made him poor, he can still mix in and do something and give him tzedakah.
But it could also be that Hashem is giving them the opportunity.
Right. Right. So that's the same thing with the doctor healing. The doctor could say, look, I shouldn't be mixing into this. Okay. Then Rabbanan, put in the Brisa.
It's about time.
Go to 10-mile train.
I've been waiting for you.
10-mile
yes.
train.
Yeah.
10 miles.
Yeah, 10 miles.
It's a special
It
quality
was
train.
half a mile away.
Mining the
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Now it's a pomegranate today. Tzad Rabbanan, Tzad in the Brisa, Minayin Shemal Beit Tzmachim Machmas Machim Nisar Mak Shchayel or Place of Chayel Lisheves. Tzad in the Brisa. Where do we know that if growth came up because of the wound and the wound healed? I'm sorry, this was after the wound had healed, and then the wound got worse, that you have to heal it again, and you have to also pay for the loss of work. And it says that this comparison between the healing and the loss of work. Maybe I could have thought, even if it's not because of the wound, you still have to pay for that. It says only, which is an exclusion, which says it's only if it's because of the wound, then he has to pay for it. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, this is Rabbi Yehuda's son that we mentioned before. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that he divides up, makes a distinction between medical bills and loss of work. He says, even if it's because of the wound, he's still exempt. So Nemarak says rak only. It's an exclusion. So apparently he's very lenient. Ikadamri, there are those that say af mach masamaka pat lagamri karabanan basrai. Some say that Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda is actually following the later sages. The later sages say that you don't have to pay not for the medical bills and not for the loss of work. Ikadamri, there are those that say af mach masamaka pat misheves chayav veripai. Some say that what Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda meant is that even if it's because of the wound, he still doesn't have to pay for the loss of work, but he does have to pay for the medical bills. Talking about those growths that grew. And who would that fit like? Come on, who would that fit like Avua, like his father, Rabbi Yehuda, that made a distinction between medical bills and loss of work? Yeah? Okay. Amar Mar. Master taught, Yochel afil shlemach masamaka tamalei marak. Could have thought that maybe he has to pay for everything that happens to this hand or whatever, even if it's not because of the wound. Says no, rak only has to pay because of the wound. If it wasn't because of the wound, I need a pasuk to tell me that he doesn't need to pay for that. It wasn't his doing. Amri, they said like this. What does it mean? It wasn't because of the wound. Kedetanya was taught in a brisa. Let's say someone didn't listen to the doctor. This is what's more common. People that visit the doctor, people to listen and not to listen. Not to listen is more common. Right here. So is that like clear? Like you didn't think
not in your house.
You didn't
No,
think-
with patience.
you didn't think much when
Not with
Well, I mean, we hope they listen.
Not with
and
family
advise
members.
them, but people are in denial and or they don't pay attention.
right.
They just, or
Not
they
with
don't
your
want to hear
family
bad
members, with
things. and
Let's
they
see what's gonna happen. Okay. Va'achal dvash, he goes and he eats honey. They call me masika or other types of candies. They should dvash v'chol min masika kash lamaka. It's not good for the wound. V'hela makasai gargusni, and gargusni starts to come onto his wound. We'll see what it is in a second. Yachal yechayv l'rapaisei, maybe he has to pay for that as well. He acted normal. Doesn't listen to the doctor. That's what normal people do. So Talmud Laimar, it says rak. It says no. The guy doesn't have to pay. My gargusni, what is gargusni? Amar Abaya nasa krichta. I don't know what that is, but Rashi says it's some sort of gangrene. Dead flesh. Maya sutu, what do you do for that? How do you heal that if it's dead flesh? It says aloe, you put aloe. Kira is wax. And kalba is some sort of sap from the barrel, the wine barrel.
Dead, it's dangerous. You don't cut it.
If it's dead, it's dead. Maybe it means that it stops that it can stop it from gangrening more.
You want to see what this guy says? He has a whole scientific thing about it.
Certain plants known as ahal are indigenous to Israel. One of them, known as the common ice plant, is an annual plant that grows in the Sharon and Shepella regions of Eretz Yisrael in rocks and walls that face the sea. The surface of these plants is covered in small translucent sacs that look like ice crystals, which give its name ice plant. The plant contains a noticeable amount of sodium carbonate and was used for laundering clothes and bathing. It can be used for medicinal purposes as a diuretic and for relieving some types of inflammation. Yeah, it's not enough for the gangrene. No, it doesn't sound like it.
You thought it was gangrene.
So it's clear, so
Huh?
it is.
You thought it was gangrene?
Yeah. Okay. So V'yomalei asichana. Now the Gemara gets really interesting. Let's say the mazik,
That was interesting.
the victim, not the victim, the perpetrator says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor. Trust me, I'm gonna heal you." After he already bruised him and cut off his hand. Amalei, you see, he doesn't want to pay the bills. He says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor also." So he says, this could happen if the doctor messes up and malpractice.
Malpractice.
And the guy says, "Okay, now pay me." He says, "No, I'm not paying you anything. Just come back to me. I'll treat it." So he says, "No, you're like a lion that's ready to pounce, predatory lion. I'm not coming to you." I'll get you a doctor that will work for free. You know this Gemara?
Oh,
That's
that's
the
worse.
sign. Amalei, it says Asya the
Go
Magin
slow.
Magin Shavya.
Yeah, go
Shava.
slow for the professor in English.
It says a doctor that heals for free is worth
Oh,
nothing.
I do know that because the Rabbi Learfield once came in my office many years ago. She was in peace. And when he was leaving, I said, "No charge."
Right.
And then he walked up to the he says, "No, that's the charge." And then he called the police and he came to me and says, "No," he says, "about the charges, nothing. People giving this valueless medicine.
Oh.
Have to charge."
Uh-huh.
Rabbi Learfield broke the window he put his hands through the window because it was so clear. So he insisted on paying for the replacement of it, even though the people that lived there were his congregants. And they said, no, don't worry about it. It was our fault because it was so clean.
Uh-huh.
Something like that.
They said, "How come Taif Shabarifim again? And one of the best
Because-
doctors to
So
get him?"
there's a lot of reasons.
So one of them is because if you're going to charge nothing, Taif Shabarifim, that nice doctor that's going to charge nothing. So on Rosh Hashanah was made up how much medical bills that person's going to have to pay. So when the doctor charges nothing, it's being a nice doctor, the guy has to get sick again because he has
I
to.
never heard that. I just know the other two. One is the guy who thinks he's the best.
Right.
Obviously doesn't rely on like Nasser them and asking
Right.
other opinions. And the other is Tov. Gematria is 9 and 6 is 15, 17, which means Shemon Esrei, he reads out Rafeinu Hashem. So he thinks he's
Very
the
nice.
one.
Very nice. Okay, so a doctor, you have to pay the doctor. The Amar, the therapists say this as well. And if it's for free, people don't. Doesn't work. Yamar Maisina la Chasi Rechika. I'm going to get you a doctor from a faraway place. It's going to be this very good. It's everything. It really knows his stuff. A doctor that comes from a faraway place can blind the person and just go on his way, and there's no repercussion for him. So he doesn't have to be so careful. There's no insurance, right? Well, yeah, he does. His reputation is not. He's not concerned about it. He just goes to another place. Let's say the guy says, "You just give me the money. I'm going to heal myself." You're going to mess up, and then you're going to charge me even more. So the markets, if he says markets, he says, let's set a price, and that's what it's going to be. Yeah, for sure you're going to mess up, and then you're going to call me like a damaging ox. You're just going to make me look bad when it's not going to heal right. Okay, so you have to get an outside doctor that lives in that area to and make up how much it's going to cost, and that's what he pays. Tana. All of these things you have to pay, even though he already paid for the loss of value. Loss of value meant as he was sold as a slave. Where do we know this from? That you have to pay also everything else. Amar Rav Zvid Shmei Rav Amar Kra. Rav Zvid says the name of Rav. We learned it from the pasuk. Petza tachas patza, a bruise for a bruise. Litin b'makom nezik. They have to pay for pain, even though you already paid for the damage. The Gemara says the Rabbi Shegig Meizid Vainis Karatin. Petza tachas patza tells me that a person that causes damage is chayiv to pay, even if he does it by accident, and because Adam Muad Lailam. It says Imkein nichtav kra petza bepetza. My petza tachas patza. Why does it? So what is that extra word? Tachas. That's coming. Shema minatarti. It's coming to tell me two things that you have to pay for the pain, even though that we already paid for the damage. Rav Papa Shmei Rav Amar Krav Rapa Yirape Litin Refuah b'Makom Nesek. The fact that it says double Rapa Yirape that the doctor will heal. That's telling me that he has to pay for the medical bills, even though he already paid for the damage. The double expression. The Gemara says, we needed that. That taught me that the doctor has permission to heal. You know that famous Ramban in Bechkaisei. There's a Ramban in Bechkaisei where he says that, what is the doctor doing in the house of those that trust in Hashem? You know that? He wrote like people should not go to doctors. Has you ever saw this? Oh, it's a very interesting. It's there's a Ramban up there.
Grab anyone.
It's at the beginning of the Chukaisai. Is Vayikra? Is blue the second bookcase?
It's Ramban.
Second bookcase.
Oh, Ramban.
Yeah. So Vayikra. Is it one volume or two volumes?
Dead giveaway.
Okay, so then it's at the end, the last parsha of the Chukaisai. Over there he says.
Disrespect. But you put it back.
Yeah. Someone, let me read it to you in English. Rather, it is clear that one who consults God through a prophet regarding an illness should not consult with doctors. And indeed, what business do doctors have in the home of those who fulfill the will of God? Given that he has promised, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I shall remove illness from your midst. And doctors' activities relate only to food and drink, warning about consuming it if it is harmful, and prescribing food or medicine to be consumed if it is healthful. It's an interesting little piece. But, anyway,
Roll your MD. Burn it.
Do
Roll
I
your MD.
understand what Christian Science is?
Maybe. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we don't go with this Ramban.
Where is Bill coming?
We don't go with it.
No one follows this Ramban.
What is that
Maybe
holy liquid?
Breslov. I know Breslov, we're not fond of doctors.
When's the last time you went to the doctor?
Yesterday, tomorrow.
Okay, so what are you telling me that you have to pay damages? You have to pay medical bills together with damages because it says for Rapi Rapi. We need Rapi Rapi to tell me something else. Tell me that doctors are allowed to heal. Let the pasuk say the doctor will heal. Shema mina, it's coming to teach me. Litin refuah b'makim nezek. It says v'roife yirape. The fact that it doesn't say v'roife yirape, it says v'rapa yirape. That's teaching me something else. So it's teaching me also that he's allowed to he has to pay medical bills together with the damage. The Gemara says. One second. We had a Gemara earlier today that said that the fact that it repeats for Rapi Rapi teaches me that you have to pay for those growths that grow on the scarring. And that he also has to pay, and that we learned from the double expression. The Gemara says, "Im kain lemekra ay rapai rapai ay yirapei yirapei." My verapai yirapei. What does it mix? The different types of words, different types of conjugations. Shema mina litin refuah b'makom nezek. It's coming to tell me that you have to pay also for medical bills, even though you already paid for the damage. Michlal, but this implies the mishkachas lushlei b'makom nezek, that there's probably a type of medical bill, even though there was no damage. How do you have a medical bill when there was no damage? So the Gemara says, Tsar, when it comes to pain, that we know how you have pain without damage. We learned in the Mishnah. Tsar, what would be a case of tsar? If he got burnt with a spit or hurt with a nail, I feel all tzipani, when I'm in his fingernail, that's a place where it doesn't cause any damage to him. It's just a burn. It's just it's painful, but it doesn't cause damage. Ripai, how do you have medical bills without damage? He had some pain. And he put on some ointment, and the ointment left him with white skin that looks like tsaras. He has to put on a new ointment to get the color back, the pigmentation back into his skin. Sheves, how do you have loss of work if there's no damage? The Hadke bin Juno Batle, he locked him in a room. That's a loss of work without damage. Didn't let him go to work. Boishas, how do you have embarrassment without damage? Dirakle Bape, he spat in his face. That's embarrassing and it's not damaged. Okay. Sheves, when it comes to loss of work, right? And I say Kilu Hashem Kishum. We view him as if he is a watching vegetables, watching kishuim or cucumbers, something. Is that what they translated there? Cucumbers? Tanarabanan, minimal wage. We're going to see here why specifically that. Tanarabanan was taught in the Bryce of Sheves when it comes to the payment of loss of work. We view him as if he was watching cucumbers. From Taimar, if you'll say that this guy got harmed by the court system because he's getting too little. The chimiftach, because when he gets healthy, hi Gavra, this person, lav agra the shemikshum shakal, he's not going to take payment of watching cucumbers. Ela dali davla v'shakal agri, he's going to be a water carrier. He's going to get much more money than just watching cucumbers. Inami also b'shliach v'shakal agra, or maybe he'll be a messenger and he'll get paid for that, being a postman or something. The Gemara says, Midasidin Lailak. So no, he was not damaged by the court system because this person was already paid for his value. In other words, when they estimated what the damage was, they took into account that now he's never going to be able to pick up to be a water carrier because he's missing a hand. He's never going to be able to be a postman because he's missing a foot. So that was already paid straight up front. That was already went with the nezek. Now the only thing is, the fact is, he's can't go to work, not because he can't be a postman. He can't go to work because he's in pain. He's in bed. What type of work could he do? Could he have been doing now? Well, he could have been up and washing cucumbers. That's the work that he could have been in this situation. So for that work that he could be doing now, but now he can't because he's in bed, so that this person has to pay for. Amar Rava. Rava says, Kates yada, if he cuts off his hand, nicely he has to pay for his hand. B'sheves, how do you figure out the value of the loss of work? Then, even though he's missing a hand, but he could be a cucumber watchman. What does he do if someone comes and takes the cucumbers? He shouts at them, right? Yeah, that's an example of what no, we're coming up to that. We're coming up to that. Shibes Raglai, he breaks his foot. That's an example. Breaks his foot. Nice and late, the May Raglai has to pay for the value of the guy with the broken foot. Can't do the same work, and he's not sold for the same price rather. B'sheves, how do you figure out the loss of work? Right, as if he's a gate, he watches the gate. You see the difference between a cucumber watchman, he has to walk around the field. The guy that just has to watch the gate just has to sit down on a chair and watch the gate. He doesn't have to walk around. It's just that gate. Let's say he blinds him. He has to pay for the value it does, but what it's worth. That means as a slave, he's worth less. B'sheves, and when it comes to loss of work, right? As if he's doing the mill, grinding at the mill. He doesn't need to see for that. Just has to keep turning this handle, and the thing turns. But if he makes him deaf, then he has to pay for everything. Now, I think what this means is that he's not able to do any work now when he's deaf. And so therefore, when it comes to the paying for the damages, he has to, when that original payment covers everything. Let me see what your Gemara says. If one deafened another, he gives him his entire value as compensation for damage because one lacking the ability to hear is not fit for any form of employment. And the Ravid explains that once he loses his hearing, no one will hire him to perform any labor because he cannot be given instructions. Therefore, causing another to become deaf is like completely destroying his monetary value. Okay.
What
Yeah.
you just read here with
The mill?
turning the mill in yesterday's handouts. Did anybody read that article? I mean,
Yeah.
that little, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
About what?
Dark.
No.
So you're going to say about the
There
handout?
was a little story, I think it was in the handouts, or it was something I read yesterday about this man that was in prison for like over 20 years.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
tied his hand to like a wheel. And that every day he would turn the wheel and turn the wheel. That was his job in the prison. And so he always imagined what was on the other side of the
All the
wall.
grain.
All right. Is he grinding grain? Was he running water, for electric power, whatever it is? And then finally, after he was let out, don't make that buzzer go off because it's a really important story. It's a good muscle. He runs to the other side of the wall and he sees there's nothing there.
Right.
So what keeps us going is knowing that there's something.
The meaning.
Tachlis for
Right.
everything that we do in this world.
Right.
Which is, it's in. I think it was in the worksheets. No, this is something.
Boy, Rava.
But I read it.
Rava has a question. Kites, let's say he cut off his hand, but they didn't evaluate how much the damage was. Shibes Raglai, then they broke his foot. And they don't evaluate how much the damage is. Then he blinds him, and he doesn't evaluate. They don't evaluate how much the damage is. And then they make him deaf. Well, what's the din? Do we say since they didn't evaluate him? So we'll just evaluate everything right now. Now he has to pay for everything because now he's deaf. You have to pay for he is not fit for any employment. Or maybe we should go back and we should look at each case. What happened every day was a different sort of damage. And on Sunday, he had this damage. Okay, let's see what he owes him for Sunday's damage. Let's see what he owes him for Monday's damage. Let's see what he owes him for Tuesday's, right? And each time he's going to get a different amount. Or do they just lump it all together to one big evaluation? Nafkamina, the difference would be the Baila Mesa Leitzara Baisha to Kol Chada V'Chada. Is he going to have to pay? Tsar is going to have to pay for the pain and embarrassment for each one. I know that for when it comes to the damage and when it comes to the medical bills and it comes to the loss of work, he doesn't have to give for each one. Given the kayavle to make kula, command the katli dami, because he has to pay him because he became deaf. He has to pay him for his whole value. So he already paid him everything. But what about tsaru baishas? But what about the pain for each one? That's independent of getting paid for now that he is not fit for employment. Maybe he should be paid for each one for the pain and for the embarrassment. Each one of those events, occurrence. Bimtim Talaymar, if you're going to say, so this is a question. Bimtim Talaymar, Kivan Layam do, maybe you could say, since they didn't evaluate him, Kayavle, the Mekula Badi Adadi, so therefore they're going to, let's say we say that they have to give him, just pay him for everything all at once. But let's say they did evaluate him. Let's say they did evaluate him. But he didn't pay it yet. Since they evaluated, so he has a separate bill for each one, and he should pay each one independently. Maybe he didn't pay it. So you have to make kula. So now we'll just have him pay it all together as payment for his entire value. Mar says, take it. We don't have an answer to this. I don't know if we don't have an answer to the last one or we don't have an answer to the first one either. Not sure. Boy Rabba has a question. If there's a loss of work, but it's not a real damage because whatever the loss of work was is going to heal. Whatever the damage was is going to heal. But right now, if he would be sold right now, there would actually be a difference in price. You know, if there's a slave being sold that has a broken arm, but the broken arm is going to heal. So right now, when he sells him with the broken arm, so he's going to get less. But if he sells him after it heals, he's going to get more. So how does that work? Should he have to pay, even though it's going to heal? Should he have to pay for a difference in value? So echidami, going to call yadai. He hits him on his hand with tzamtza yadai. Tzamtza sounds like it shrinks. So how do they translate it? It shrinks or it swells. The seifel achzer, but it's going to heal. Shriveled, but it's going to heal. What's it in? Given the seifel achzer layav leimidi. Do we say you shouldn't have to give him anything because just wait, it's going to heal? Or maybe no. Now it's worth less. Well, tashima. If someone hits his father and his mother and he doesn't make a bruise, therefore he's not chayav misa. We're looking for a way where he's going to have to make a payment. If he makes a bruise, he doesn't have to make a payment because he gets a death penalty. Or if he hits his friend on Yom Kippur. So he's chayav the kulan, he has to pay all 5 types of damages. The Gemara says, one second. How does he have damages if he didn't make any bruise? So lav kagain shikal yadav seifalachzer must mean that there's no permanent damage, but because it's going to come back. And it says that he has to pay. You see, he has to pay for damages. He has to pay for damages even though it's going to heal. It says Amri, they said like this: he made him deaf, but he didn't make any bruise. So that's why he has to pay for damages. The Gemara says that doesn't fit. Because Rabba says someone that makes his father deaf is gets killed. there has to be, when it comes deaf, there has to be some sort of bruise. Tips of the dam enough. There's a drop of blood that went into his ear. And that drop of blood is enough to give the child, the death penalty for bruising his father. We're talking about that he caused damage to him. That's not a permanent damage, and it's not a wound. It's because he shaved his head. Yeah. But it comes back. It says v'hainu bayan. That's exactly what we're talking about. That's our question. It's going to return, and the question is, does he have to pay for the temporary damage? Why is that a damage? Maybe he has a job that he needs hair for.
For the bush.
Yeah, but there's also has to be damage. We said he pays for 5 things. They said, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with that they used a type of a cream, depilatory cream that makes that the hair doesn't grow back.
Oh.
In other words, we don't really have an answer to our question of let's say it will return, because it could be that we're talking about here a type of cream where the hair never grows back, and so this could be a difference in price and actually in damage. Just like kartufni beresha, the pain is because he has, I don't know what kartufni is, some sort of cracks in the skin.
No, kartofel is what's in Yiddish.
Kartoffel?
Yeah,
it's potatoes.
Potatoes, yeah.
He has cracks in the skin. Mehanu kartufni, and he gets pain because of this, because of the cracks in the skin. I guess when he put on that ointment, they cause him the pain. The medical bills, because he has to be healed. Because he was a dancer. You know, the Israelis, they dance with their hands. You know, they move their hands like this. Well, he would dance with his head. This Yiddish joke. This lady wanted to fan herself. I forget how you say a fan in Yiddish, but they said, "You want a 5-cent one or a 25-cent one?" I said, "For me, it's good, the 5-cent one." So a few minutes later, it's broken. So she goes back to the guy and said, "It broke." So they said, "Did you buy the 5-cent or the 25?" And I bought the 5-cent. They says, "The 25-cent one you fan like this, but the 5-cent one you have to fan like this." Anyway, so he would in Yiddish. Okay, so this guy would move his head, and he can't do it because of these. Basically he can't do his work. What about the baishas? The embarrassment. There's no bigger embarrassment than this. Okay, fine. That's the embarrassment because he's left bald. Okay. Milsa, the boy Leila Rabba had this question about a temporary loss of value. Should that be? Should he have to pay for it? Pshita Leila Abaya lahachkis or Rava lahachkis. So Abaya and Rava knew the answer, but they just had a machlekas about it. Maybe that was Rabba's question: do I go like Abaya or do I go like Rava? But Rabba's the teacher. The Itmar was taught in a statement of Amiroim. It says he called Yadav Vitzamsa v'Seipel Lachzer. Hit him on his hand, shriveled, and now it's going to come back to regular. He has to pay the big loss of work and the small loss of work. The Shevis Gedela means now he has to pay the value of the hand, which means the nezek. There was a damage, and also he has to pay. Right now he wasn't able to do the work that he usually did, so he has to pay Shevis Ketana. That means as a watchman watching cucumbers. Rava says no. He only has to pay Shebechol Yom V'Yom. He just has to pay. Right now he can't do the work, so he just has to pay for that Shabbos. Okay, which means that Abaya says that you have to pay for the temporary decrease of value, and Rava says no. Itzmar, a statement like this: if someone cuts off the hand of someone else's Jewish slave, okay. Now it gets complicated because who's going to get the money? So Abaya says, the decrease of value goes to the slave because he is not a real slave. He's just a slave by this person for 6 years. But the loss of work, that has to go to the master because he was hired by the master to do work. Now he can't do that work. So his decrease in value goes to the slave himself, and the loss of work goes to the master. That's a buyer.
But doesn't the owner of the slave own anything that's
By a non-Jewish slave, not by a Jewish slave.
says,
Yeah, Eved Ivri. Rava says, "Akol yinas and levet." You give everything to the slave. V'yilkach mem karka. He buys land. Barav eichel peros, and the master can eat the fruits of that because I guess the loss of work. That's how he takes it. I'm not sure how he came up with this. Gemara says, "Pshita piches eitzel atzma yiveitzel rabbi le piches." It's obvious that if there's a loss for him, but not by the master, what would a case be? The pascular ratio, he cut off the top of his ear, or his nose, where he can still do work, but he still has a loss because he's missing his ear, or he can still hear. If someone's missing an ear, they can still hear the top. Yeah, so for him there was a loss. The loss, I guess, because maybe as a slave he would be sold for less. But for the master, he can still do whatever work he was doing before. So then hakol atzmai. Piches eitzel rabbi, but let's say there's a loss for the master as well. So that's plikta d'Abaye Rava. That's the machlekes Abaye Rava of how the master gets the money. Does he get it directly, or does he get it by buying property and he gets it from there? When it comes to embarrassment, then it depends on who's causing the embarrassment and who's getting embarrassed. Mani Masnisin, who's the author of our Mishnah? Lei Reb Meir, Lei Reb Yehuda, El Reb Shimon. It's not Reb Meir, it's not Reb Yehuda, it must only be Reb Shimon. Those are 3 out of the 5 students of Rabbi Akiva. The Tanan was taught in the Mishnah Kula on Ryan Isakila and Bnei Chayrim Shedim and Chsem Shem Avram Yitzchak Yaakov de Reb Meir. Meir holds that you have to look at everyone equally, whether they're wealthy, whether they're poor. You imagine that they're all poor, but they're still children of Avram Yitzchak and Yaakov. They're all equal. Okay, some are more equal. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Hagadol lefi gadlai v'hakatan lefi katnai." Says no. I think the way the Gemara is learning this now is that we're talking about a rich person is according to his wealth, and is that how it's being translated? And a katan, which is referring to a poor person, is according to his lack of wealth. Reb Shimon says, "Ashirim reinas kilim b'nei chayrim she'adim nechseim." The wealthy people, you view them as if they're poor. And aniyim, and the poor people, kipchusim shabehem, like the lowest of the poor. In other words, we're going to give them the lowest payment for embarrassment. So Mani, who's the author of our Mishnah that says that we look at each person according to who he is? You see, what was happening in this was that we were looking at everyone equally, except according to Rabbi Yehuda, that didn't say that. So the Gemara says, Mani, who is the author of our Mishnah? Reb Meir Masnisin Ketania Kalafiam Mavayis Ra Misbayis. Our Mishnah said that it depends on who was causing the embarrassment, who was getting embarrassed. Reb Meir Kulabadi Adadin. According to Reb Meir, he puts everyone in the same bracket. Reb Yehuda, if it's Reb Yehuda Masnisin Ketania, our Mishnah says Amavayis just assume a chayev. Reb Yehuda Imer Suma Ein Leibaishas. The Mishnah said, doesn't say, it's not in this Mishnah. It's further on. The Mishnah says that if someone, 86b, it's right on the next page, someone that embarrasses a blind person is chayev. Rabbi Yehuda says that he's not chayev. So our Mishnah can't be Rabbi Yehuda. So mainly baishas. Elalav Reb Shimon. It must be the opinion of Reb Shimon. Okay, so our Mishnah is going to be the opinion of Reb Shimon. What did Reb Shimon say? That you view everyone as poor, and the poor people are even poor. But basically, there still is a difference between wealthy and poor people, although we don't view the wealthy as wealthy, we view them as poor, but the poor are considered even poor, the lowest. The Gemara says, actually, our Mishnah could be Rabbi Yehuda. Kim Rabbi the Sumain le Baishas. When did Rabbi the say that a blind person doesn't have the laws of embarrassment? Lemishkal minay. That means to take payment from him if he embarrassed someone else. But to give him yavinalei, we give him the payment of embarrassment. So Amavayish just assumed that it said in the Mishnah is actually Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yehuda only said that a blind person doesn't have to pay embarrassment. Why would that be? Maybe because it's not considered kavana. Embarrassment is only if he does it on purpose and he's blind, he doesn't recognize what he's doing. But Midiktani Seifa, the problem is, says Hamavayish as a Yoshin Chayiv, Yoshin Shabiyash is pater. Someone embarrasses a person while he's asleep. So he's Chayiv. But if a sleeping person embarrasses, then he's pater. But if that's the case, that there's a difference between a blind person as well, that if you embarrass a blind person, you're Chayiv. But if a blind person embarrasses his pater, then it should have said that over there as well. Michlal. Excuse me. The fact that it didn't say it, that it doesn't matter. It must be according to Rabbi Yehuda, both of them is pater. El machvarta, masnisin, Reb Shimon. Rather, we're going to have to say that our Mishnah is the opinion of Reb Shimon. Okay. Mantan ladatan rabbanon. Who's the one that taught the following brayse? Niskaven. Labayish as a katan, lavish as a gadol. Noisin the gadol the meibashti shel katan. Someone intended to embarrass a, how does it translate a katan? A child, or does it translate it as a small man? I think the Gemara is going to understand that it's talking about a poor person. But instead, he embarrassed, and it turned out that that's not who he was. He embarrassed, it was a big person. So you have to give the big person what you intended, the value of what you intended, which was the smaller person. You intended to embarrass a slave, but you ended up embarrassing a free person. So you have to give the value of what the embarrassment would be to the slave. Mani, who's the author? It can't be like anyone. Why can't it be like anyone? Kasal Kadaita, the Gemara says like this. We think what's happening here is katan bin nechasim, gadol is gadol bin nechasim. We're talking about wealthy and poor and wealthy. If it's according to Meir, then how could we say that you have to give the value of this one or the value of that one? According to Meir, there's no difference in value anyway. They're all the same. Rabbi Yehuda, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda holds that slaves don't have embarrassment. Just like he said, blind people don't have embarrassment. Reb Shimon, if it's Reb Shimon, if you intended to embarrass one person, but you embarrass someone else, you're actually exempt entirely. My time, what's the reason? Kiktala. Just like that was Reb Shimon's view. If someone intended to kill someone, but he killed the wrong person, Reb Shimon held that he's exempt. That you only chayiv if you actually have intention. The sages argue. But the ksiv arav levakamalav, she's kavanlei. So Beishas Nami Adam Mechavanle, the Ksiv Sholchi Adam Yichsim Mevushavad she is Kavanle. According to Reb Shimon, they have to actually have intent. You shouldn't have to pay anything. So it doesn't fit with anyone. The Gemara says, Lailam Rabbi Yehuda, really it is the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Chikam Rabbi Yehuda in Lavadim Beishas. When did Rabbi Yehuda say that slaves don't have embarrassment? Lemeisvalahu, that's to give them the money. Avalameisam Saminan Bu. But to evaluate how much it would be worth, that we can still do when we give it to this person that was a free person that was embarrassed. Okay, just because the guy doesn't collect it, that doesn't mean that it didn't have a value to that embarrassment. Iba Yisayim, if you want, you could say, I feel Reb Meir, that it's the opinion of Reb Meir. Misav, gadol ben nechasim, katan ben nechasim. You're talking about poor and rich? No, gadol mamish is talking about an adult, katan mamish, an adult versus a child. Someone intended to embarrass a child, it's not as bad as if he embarrassed an adult. Or maybe it's the opposite. The child remembers that embarrassment for many more years than the adult. Maybe it's the opposite. It doesn't tell me which way it's going. The Gemara says, is a child really someone that gets embarrassed? Yes. Kedamar Rav Papa, like Rav Papa says, the michlam ulei umichlam. Achinami, the michlam ulei umichlam. Because when they remind him about how he was embarrassed when he was younger, he gets embarrassed. So that's you'll get embarrassed. It sounds like it's talking about a baby, not a child. A child, of course, gets embarrassed, right? Why do you have to remind him when he's older? Every child would get embarrassed. I'm not sure.
There's a commentary here from Hidushei Haribid, says a minor, again, Katan, is mentally immature and has the legal status of a mentally deranged person. Hence, he can act shamefully and not care, and he feels no embarrassment when others humiliate him. It's just the opposite of what you just said.
Uh-huh.
So the minor doesn't know.
When he gets older,
You have to have a certain amount of mental capacity.
Self-awareness.
Okay. Let's leave it over here.
What?
Oh.
The younger